The absence of US President Donald Trump at the G20 Leaders Summit in Johannesburg at the weekend continues to set tongues wagging. This has drawn mixed reaction from different quarters, and speculation is rife as to what will happen at next year's summit, with the US set to occupy the presidency for the next 12 months. Let's unpack this development with former South African ambassador to the USA, Ebrahim Rasool, who joins us in studio. Very good afternoon to you. Thanks very much for coming through.
Well, thanks very much, and it's great speaking to you in the studio.
Sweet revenge for you, given just how well things went this past weekend?
I think it's not so much revenge as injustice being served. I think the world needed to see that things can happen despite and in the absence of the US president. He needed to see he's not as powerful as he thinks. He needed to see that those that he thinks are either afraid of him or his allies would come to South Africa nonetheless. Even the Italian Prime Minister, even the Argentinians, even Saudi Arabia that he saw recently in the White House. I think he needed to see that, and it must be a wake-up call for him.
Do you think it will be a wake-up call for him, given how he tends to conduct himself?
He's not a person who shows remorse. He's a person who doubles down when he's in trouble. But I do think what he does respect, and that's what our president displayed enormously over this last few weeks, is that he respects strength. He respects backbone. We've tried the route for much of this G20 president of appeasement. When the president switched gears towards what I call a contingency scenario, where we look who are our allies and how do we hold hands, how do we build a multilateral system so that we don't stand alone against him, and how do we take out insurance policies, find sources of funds, sources of energy from different places, then Donald Trump begins to be more measured. He only respects that. We only need to look at his back down on Mamdani in the White House. We only need to look that now on Saturday, when he woke up, the declaration was passed. And then all he said, South Africa was not playing by the rules. He never plays by the rules. And now he says, what the heck? Did South Africa just do this? And that, I think, is the beginning of respect.
Let's say the penny doesn't drop, right? And he continues to behave the way he has been behaving. What would you say what would be the consequences for him and his administration? In other words, do you think that the world, on the back of this G20, the declaration that was adopted, and how everything went, do you think that is it too early to say perhaps the world has indeed begun to reimagine a world without the US altogether?
I think that's what brought this remarkable consensus together. And of course, the president had enough wordsmiths to soften the language, to keep Saudi Arabia in, to soften this issue, to bring in Argentina, not to make people too scared to confront him. But I was in Europe up till Saturday morning. And I had gone to Chatham House, I had gone to various places in Netherlands and so forth. And for lots of Europe, the penny dropped when Donald Trump's peace plan on Ukraine coincided with the talking points of Russia. Then they knew they were on their own. Then they knew they needed to hold hands here at the G20. In much the same way that the Muslim world feels that we've got this ceasefire, but we don't know where it's going to go. So let's take out this insurance policy with the G20. So I think people are waking up to it. I think President Trump is next year going to try and narrow the agenda. He may even try to weed out countries like South Africa. We must brace for that. We must sit out next year. But when we are invited, go for the financial issues, the macroeconomic policies that he wants to discuss, and confine ourselves. But around that, I think we have so much in this declaration that will keep the world busy for a while. Africa centrality is critical. I think the move that we played on critical minerals is the holy grail for the United States, and he knows that we are snookering him on how we're going to manage all of those kind of things. And I think he's going to learn new respect, but that doesn't mean he changes his behavior.
But what are the chances of the USA's presidency rolling back some of the gains that have been made, especially over the past three G20s, where you had India, you've had Brazil, and now South Africa? What are the chances of a lot of the work that was done over the past few years being rolled back?
You see, President Trump has played his trump card by cutting off all aid, all health, all AGOA is effectively dead, putting 30% tariffs on South Africa and all other countries. He's played the trump card that he has played. So what is left, we don't need to fear as much. What he's going to do, he's going to try and nullify the climate issues in the declaration. He's going to try and nullify the gender and women and youth issues because that's DEI, according to him. He's going to try and do a lot of those kind of things, but that's what we braced for in the first place. And so we must just stay in the brace position and move those things to where they belong. And so how do we take the health agenda, push it into the replenishing, the global fund? How do we take the climate agenda, push it into COP17? Already, other countries in Europe are coming together and saying, we'll fund part of your just energy transition. So the insurance policies that we have taken out will lessen the shock. And that, I think, is the cleverness of what has happened over this past weekend, that we moved to a contingency scenario and we have been able, therefore, to brace ourselves and to have insurance policies as we go forward.
Do you think he may look to perhaps refresh or reset even his relationships with traditional allies like your United Kingdoms, for example, to sort of keep some of his traditional allies, in other words, not allow a situation where everybody just deserts him?
You see, I think President Trump will be fully conscious of the fact that America first is increasingly becoming America alone. And for him to start running after countries is unprecedented. And so that's a great spot to be in. He will try, like he's done, for example, with Australia, to say, I'll put my Navy in Perth to patrol the Pacific, but I will sign an offtake agreement with you for all your critical minerals. So he's going to try and find those kind of deals, but already he is doing that because the correspondence out of Washington is that he is saying, no, don't worry about this Ukraine, this 28 point. It's up for negotiations. It's only the first draft. That's unprecedented for President Trump. And I think that what it means is that multilateralism is emerging strongly again. We're over the shock and awe of the Trump executive orders. We've been tested with tariffs and trade wars and aid cuts, and we've survived it. The great thing about the declaration is it's saying, listen, we've got to find our own sources of funding within Africa. Let's set up this team. South Africa will manage this team, and we will look at how we can fund it. And the rest of the world is saying, we are with you. Because you see, the rest of the world understands what Mr. Trump doesn't understand at this point. That when you give us a goer, you are not doing us a favor. When you are giving us preferential trade, you're not doing us a favor. When you give us aid and health services and PEPFAR and so on, you're not doing. What you are doing is you are exchanging the tangible, US funds and US markets, for the intangible. Because for as long as we can look after our people don't migrate. For as long as our people feel secure at home, they don't become a threat to the rest of the world. For as long as diseases are prevented and managed here, we don't have the threat of global pandemics. And that is what Europe has understood. It's what the rest of the world has understood. And that's what Mr. Trump is going to learn, to his great horror, if he doesn't maintain the exchange of the tangible for the intangible.
Let's bring closer to home. Do you have hope that we will reach a trade deal agreement anytime soon?
I think that South Africa will reach a trade agreement if we are absolutely conscious of our leverages and what cards we have. We have upward of 70% of the world's platinum, and no car can drive without it. We have the chromium and other things. Africa commands 30% of the critical minerals. That, amongst many others, would be the holy grail, as I said, that Mr. Trump wants. But we need more consciously to operate with it in the same way that China doesn't retaliate. It played dominoes with Mr. Trump. He said 125% tariffs. They said 120. When he went to 250, they said, we're now playing chess. We'll just withhold the critical minerals. And Mr. Trump had to contrive a meeting in South Korea with the Chinese in order to win a year's reprieve. Now that's what is respect. We don't have the cards that China has, but we have some cards that I think we need to play more consciously. And very importantly, we now know, as President Ramaphosa has shown, that we have convening power. We have moral power. When Mr. Trump says, I'm not coming to the G20 because you are making a genocide against white people, the world knows it's false. But he's weakened his moral case. Had he said, for example, we just want to focus on a macroeconomic agenda, that's why we're not coming, they're discussing everything, the world may have doubted who was right and wrong. Did we deviate from the agenda? Did he boycott? But because he used the old stereotype of discredited idea of genocide, land confiscation, and so forth, he muddied his own case in the audience of the world. And very importantly, that global public has already sided with South Africa. Whether we win the legal case in the ICJ or not against Israel, global opinion has shifted behind South Africa's moral position on that matter.
But what, though, are the cards we have, that which you say, or at least imply, we still haven't used?
I think we have started to flex our muscle with an insertion into the G20 declaration about how we prefer to use our critical minerals. That is throwing down a card to say, watch the space. We are going to be a lot more jealously guarding. It's not extraction as usual. We're going to do it. Had Mr. Trump not threatened Nigeria, Africa may have been split on that. But when Nigeria has been very accommodating, very appeasing, when they get threatened, then suddenly Africa starts to say, no, we've got to hang together, otherwise we fall together. And so we need to reinsert ourselves into the African context in a manner that we haven't seen since the days, for example, of President Mbeki, that we become the foundation on which the African prosperity and development will grow. So that's the second major card. The third one is BRICS isn't ready to become confrontational. There's too many disparate things within BRICS. But the threat of BRICS is more important than the fact of BRICS at this moment, and that's what Mr. Trump is trying to manage. How do you stop this becoming the kind of bloc? How do you make sure that the D word never enters again into the lexicon, the D word being de-dollarization? That's what they were very afraid of when I was there, because a thought, once thought, can't be unthought. And all of these things are happening. So BRICS becomes absolutely critical. And I think South Africa emerging as craftily under the leadership of President Ramaphosa out of this G20, suddenly the world is saying South Africa's geopolitical positioning is back. We missed it. We missed the kind of courage that South Africa used to display. It seems to be back, and that becomes an absolutely critical. Our convening power is a critical issue that we must play amongst our cards.
Now, you still haven't been replaced as South Africa's ambassador to the United States of America. And I'm trying to imagine what you'd be doing this morning. Say you had just landed in Washington after the weekend summit. You have some business to do, which is to ensure that our interests are represented in the United States of America. There's this outstanding trade deal that has to be concluded sooner rather than later. What would you be doing today and the rest of this week?
I would say that the first thing we need to do in the USA is to go and speak to a South African constituency in the USA. South Africa has a constituency there that is feared. That's a leverage. Because we've cultivated...
Who are those?
We've cultivated, for example, the anti-apartheid movement. Lots of people who understand politics today learned it by protesting outside the South African embassy, amongst the unions, civil society, African Americans, the Christian churches, etc. And really to say to them, this is the report from Johannesburg. The second thing is really to go out and mobilize the business community, because you see, that was the vote of no confidence in Mr. Trump's strategy. When the B20 came to South Africa, met with full-on representation from US business people, because they are not interested, they don't see a genocide, they don't see land confiscation. What they see is business that is being run from South Africa, and business that is going to accelerate across Africa with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. They have seen that. So I would go and mobilize them. I think South Africa doesn't need an ambassador if it mobilizes its constituency, if it mobilizes the beneficiaries of our increasingly better business, and if it mobilizes the goodwill that is there.
Lastly, before I let you go, a few weeks ago, you turned the ANC down. They wanted you to convene the provincial task team in the Western Cape. You then came back and said, unfortunately, you're taking on a new role. Talk to us about that new role, but also whether you have any regrets having done something you've never done before, which is to say no to the ANC.
Vuyo, that was one of the most difficult things to do. I've never said no to the ANC when they appointed me to things, nor have I said no when they disappointed me to things such as the premiership in the Western Cape after Polokwane. So saying no to the ANC is hard for someone who's died in the wool ANC. But I needed to be clear-headed, not nostalgic. I needed to understand how more useful am I to South Africa than serving as the convener there. If I had taken that task, I would be provincialized. But immediately I was able to do, from Turkey through to the Netherlands, through to London, to do the kind of TV shows that can say the things in a way that an ANC person or a government person cannot say, to interpret things bluntly. So that's what I've chosen. I've chosen to do it with the foundation that I founded, the World for All Foundation. It says what's our vision, and it means that I can speak, and therefore I can go on a Piers Morgan show, and I can take them on because I don't have to carry the dignity of my country with me, although I conducted myself, I hope, with enough dignity in the face of a moronic onslaught. But that's the audience I wanted to speak to, your kind of MAGA crowd, and push them back with facts and calmness rather than succumb to it. So I think I've made the right decision. I don't have any regrets from that decision, but it was difficult.
What do you believe the ANC has a chance, not only in the Western Cape, but broadly, of recovering from what happened last year?
I think if the ANC uses what happened in the last 2 weeks that culminated in this massive achievement at the G20, if we see the president's courage in standing up to Trump translates into a courage to take on the corrupt in the ANC, if we are able to say that the same way in which he stiffened his back against the boycott of Donald Trump, he will stiffen his back to get service delivery going from our municipalities and all of those kind of things. And if he pushes back the unnecessary contestation for succession and says, listen, we're fighting for our life. Are you fighting who will stand in the front pew at the funeral service of the ANC? Or are we going to put all hands up? If that's the kind of way in which the ANC will conduct itself, I'm not sure about the Western Cape, but I do think we can see the parabola will hit its bottom point and begin to swing upwards. Whether it swings upward fast enough and far enough, it's up to the electorate, but I do think we are finding the formula.
No, I can't resist this. There were moves at the last NEC meeting to get rid of you, or at least begin that process. But I'm told people had cold feet, but a lot of other things that also came into play. What do you think will happen if indeed the people who want to push him out succeed in the next few weeks or maybe months?
I think we need to understand that when the epitaph is written for the ANC after such a move, that the debating point will be, was this murder or suicide? And it will fall onto the balance of suicidal if we do the kind of things out of impatience and anger and all of those kind of things. On the other hand, there is no more courage-inspiring persona than a dead man walking. I did some of my best work in the Western Cape when I knew that my opponents in the ANC was all out to get rid of me. I could do it with having seen my end. I always refer to myself as Lazarus. I've seen my death so I can live my life. And I can go to a glorious death if needs be. I think that's what the president brought to the G20. And that's what I think will take us forward as we go to the next elections.
Well, his retractors' arguments are that the country is on autopilot in any event. In other words, we've been looking for the Cyril Ramaphosa we saw, especially in the past couple of weeks, and we didn't find him.
They said the same thing ahead of Polokwane. And we all know where that kind of took us. We wanted non-aloofness. And what did we get? And so I think unless you have really defined who and what collective will take us forward, what's the vision, what's the clean-up, what's the elements of the program? Because when a movement is in trouble, it wants to change personalities like a soccer team, get rid of the coach. But it doesn't change the playing pattern on the field. It doesn't tweak the line-up. And so I think deal with the pattern that we're playing, deal with the line-up that we are putting forward, and then, if things continue, get to the coach. But let the coach run out his contract, because there's nothing that signals power hunger more than precipitate action to replace a leader. We've done it 2 times in the past, and every time we pay for it because the percentages just keep on coming down, and there is... So this is the definition of Einstein's madness, doing the same thing over and over.
Ebrahim Rasool, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Vuyo. This was great.
So, my SA ambassador to the United States of America, Ebrahim Rasool.